directly ties in with the 2012 information and why it's all relevant. This is one of those central links that just brings it all together. Now, here's the deal. This particular man was a rocket scientist and had done a lot of really good work with bringing the Russian people to a knowledge of how to get out into space and how to possibly mine the moon for fuel for rockets and so forth. But he had an experience where under Stalin, he was put into a concentration camp and spent a long period of time stuck in this concentration camp. And when he got out, he started to do this in the 50s. He started to do this incredible research where he became aware of this new information. Now, the guy's name is Dr. Nikolai Kozyrev, K-O-Z-Y-R-E-V.
Still alive?
No.
Okay.
He passed away in the 80s. And anyway, one of the things that he discovered started with him looking at colonies of bacteria and seeing that they grew in spiraling form, that a spiral would actually show up in these bacteria. He became convinced there was an energy source that actually went into life that was spiraling, that was not electromagnetic energy. And over the course of a series of experiments that I detail in my third book, which is free on my website called Divine Cosmos, which you can read at ascension2000.com, ASCENSION2000.com. Kozyrev's experiments found this energy source through things as simple as moving an object through the air. Just the movement alone, even in a vacuum-sealed area, would create some kind of energy wave that you could measure. Now, he discovered a way to measure these waves, and he was doing all these mechanical experiments and finding different ways to generate them mechanically, like, for example, smashing something or lifting something, anything that would cause these ripples. But then one day, he's sitting there reading his favorite story, which is The Temptation of Faust by the devil Mephistopheles.
Right.
And he gets really excited. And he has this device near him. He was running an experiment at the time, and the device was pointed at the experiment, obviously. And he gets this sudden spike of energy, and the needle turns and points at him. At him? Yeah. And all of a sudden, his whole world just kind of thundered in on him, and he said, "These waves are consciousness."
It's out there. You know, there have been a number of people who believe now that consciousness is also science, and that never would have happened before.
Well, check it out. The other one that I really want to point out, because it ties in so directly to 2012, was from Dr. James Spottiswoode, who's one of these parapsychological researchers, very well known, very well renowned, coming out of California, the whole Berkeley area, which again is where we have this UFO Expo that I'll be speaking at in the weekend after this coming weekend, co-presenting with Richard on some of these same things we're talking about tonight. And George, you're going to be there. It should be great.
I will be there.
So anyway, I should also point out, while we still have a chance, that I have a cruise coming up in the Caribbean. That's in October.
I'll do that later.
Okay. We'll do that at the end of the show. So anyway, to get back to the point, we are dealing with a consciousness, and this guy, Dr. James Spottiswoode, took 20 years worth of remote viewing data and data from a wide variety of psychic experiments, Ganzfeld, Zener cards, all these things where they were studying ordinary people to see if they were psychic in the laboratory. And he found out, what he was looking for was to see if there was any universal factor in time that would affect people's psychic accuracy. And what he found was that when the Earth, when you doing the experiment, the psychic work, are on the Earth aimed at the center of the galaxy, so that your point on that globe of the Earth, if you imagine the Earth like an orange in your hand and you're sitting on top of that orange, and then you point yourself towards the galactic center, at those times, people's psychic ability increases by almost 400%. They get 400% more accurate on these tests. So what does that tell us? That tells us that your position in the galaxy directly affects consciousness. You with me?
I'm with you, I think.
Okay. So what this really shows is that the galactic center is a source of energy that's very powerful, that affects consciousness, so that when you're aimed at the center of the galaxy, it's like there's a radio beacon streaming at you, and you're picking up that wave, and it's affecting how you think.
Now, why the galaxy as opposed to the entire universe?
Well, some of the Russians, like Dr. A.M. Mishin, have actually found waves that come from the center of the universe as well as the center of the galaxy.
So it's everywhere.
Yeah. But the galaxy center is like the strongest local area where these energy waves are coming to us. It appears to be the strongest one that we deal with day by day on the Earth. So it's not really too much more of a stretch to figure out that if these waves behave like a liquid, the ether, as it's called, and remember, Dr. Eugene Malov, formerly the head science writer at NASA, right before he died on the telephone with Richard, he said in no uncertain terms, this is not electromagnetic energy. It is a new kind of energy that most of our scientists know nothing about. There is another guy by the name of Dr. William Tift who discovered that the standard thing that everybody uses to figure out how far away a star is called redshift measurements. It's basically, without getting too detailed, they take the microwave energy from a star and they say if the microwaves are this, then it's this far away, and if they're this, then it's this far away.
Okay, let's assume then that this is all true and that there is this form of energy that is out there.
Okay.
How does this all tie in then to what the Mayans may or may not have known?
2012 is like a boundary between oil and water. If you can imagine two fluids at two different levels of viscosity, okay, just like oil and water in a salad container, then what happens is, as our solar system gets closer to this boundary that's sitting there in the galaxy, in other words, the galaxy has this field, if you can imagine this now, when you look at a bar magnet and you stick it under a piece of paper and then you sprinkle a bunch of iron filings over it, what happens?
They all go together.
You get these lines of magnetic force.
And you see a perfect pattern.
Right. Now, we know that the galaxy has a magnetic field, and a very strong one, which means that it's going to have lines of magnetic force where some of it is stronger than the rest. Now, those lines of magnetic force are not only magnetic energy, that's where this hyperdimensional energy shows up as well. So what's happening, in a very simple analogy, is our solar system in 2012 is going to bust into one of those magnetic lines of force in the galactic magnetic field.
Now, what does that mean?
It means that it has a stimulating and programming effect upon DNA, just like it has every other time that this has happened. All the mass evolutions of species on the Earth have occurred, according to two University of Chicago paleontologists, David Rope and James Sepkoski, every 26 million years like clockwork. Now, we know that there's more solar activity in the last 60 years than there's been in the previous 1,000 years, and that graph is on page 3 of the View Images section on coasttocoastam.com. Now, if that's true, then it means that our carbon dating system's all screwed up, because we're assuming that it always stays the same, but the level that we think it stays at is a lot slower than what happens at the end of the cycle. So if the carbon dating says 26 million years, it's probably closer to something like 22.5. Now, if it's 22.5 and you multiply that by 10, you get 225 million years. That's exactly how long the galaxy takes to spin one time around. So now what we have is a galaxy, if you can imagine it like a pie, and you've cut the pie into 10 pieces. Each of those pieces, when you hit the boundary between one piece and another, every time we hit one of those, all the dinosaurs change, and they become something different. And these guys, these Chicago paleontologists, they had over 55,000 different genres of marine life. It was the most exhaustive fossil record ever put together. They did not know that they were going to find this when they were looking for it. In fact, they tried to do more research to disprove it because they said it doesn't make sense. Why would it be every 26 million years that there's a mass extinction and then these new species come up?
Are you saying that in 2012, that's the date of a new moment of extinction?
The extinction's already happening, man. I mean, look at what's happened in the last 100 years. We've lost over 60% of all the species on the Earth. The United Nations has already said that we're in a mass extinction event which is equal to or greater than the Cretaceous-Tertiary boundary,